When it comes to massive companies like Google, YouTube, Facebook, these companies are the ones deciding what speech is acceptable on their platforms, and they don't really respect free speech. They've proven for years that they're willing to shut out everyone's voice that they don't like, and it is definitely difficult for them to do with channels that grow extremely quickly or have massive followings because they don't want it to be obvious that they're controlling what people see and controlling what people even say on their platforms. They want to make it seem like they have the perfect space on the internet for everyone with all different viewpoints and opinions, even though that's not really the case. I talk about it all of the time just with YouTube and occasionally these other websites. YouTube has been caught mass demonetizing people and banning accounts all of the time for various reasons, and unfortunately a lot of the times, channels that get banned aren't even doing anything wrong. They're just doing something that might be seen as a little bit controversial. Again, though, it's not about free speech to these companies. It's about what they deem as acceptable, and they've got rules in place to ban anyone that they don't think is going to make them money, because at the end of the day, all these companies want to do is make money. So if you're not advertiser friendly, you don't matter to companies like YouTube. But Google is actually in the line of fire by the Department of Justice now because the DOJ is suing Google. Showdown with gatekeeper to the internet over claims it uses its power unfairly to preserve a monopoly and shut out any search engine competitors. They're not the first company to do something like this, and they most certainly won't be the last. But before we get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow me on social media for updates to topics that I cover, and if you want to support even further, you can become a Dark Titan via Patreon. I appreciate all of the support. So the Department of Justice slapped Google with a blockbuster antitrust lawsuit claiming it unlawfully maintains a monopoly to preserve its position as the gatekeeper to the internet and stop any would-be competitors from even coming close to having a bite of the market. The complaint alleges that Google dominates the market unfairly by making billions in ad revenue, then using the money to cement its presence on smartphones and devices with exclusionary deals with the likes of Apple, Samsung, and LG to ensure it is the only search engine promoted anywhere. It makes it not only unfair for consumers who are deprived of innovation and choice, but according to the government, shuts out any possible competitor like Yahoo or Bing from promoting their product anywhere, and in turn starves them of the opportunity to compete. It definitely does deprive consumers of innovation and choice, but it also does really hurt these other companies who are trying to thrive as well. Google is a huge company. They're one of the biggest companies in the world, and of course they want to cement their business everywhere. Of course, they want to make sure that they're the large and in charge company that everyone knows of. I mean, everyone knows what Google is. When you don't know something, you say, I'm gonna Google it. Google it is kind of a term at this point. Even if you just mean search it, even if it's not on Google, we all kind of say, we're just gonna Google it, and they know that they have a market. They know that enough people know their name, but they want to make sure that everyone always remembers their name and goes to Google first before they go to anyone else. 11 states have co-signed the lawsuit: Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, South Carolina, and Texas. Each state's attorney general is Republican. The lawsuit asks Google to enter structural relief against any parties harmed and that it end the antitrust agreements. The White House advisor says Trump also consulted the Department of Justice on the lawsuit, which is the result of a 16-month investigation and a promise from Attorney General Bill Barr to go after the predominantly Democrat world of big tech. This is pretty similar to what happened to Microsoft and what Microsoft was doing when they got hit by antitrust all the way back in 2001. The United States government accused Microsoft of illegally maintaining its monopoly position in the PC market through the legal and technical restrictions it put on PC manufacturers manufacturers and users to uninstall Internet Explorer and to use other programs. They wanted people to only use Internet Explorer to access the internet, and they were making it extremely difficult to use other browsers, and they got hit for it by the government. Continuing on with the article, though, it comes less than 2 weeks before the election, but Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen on Tuesday told reporters that the timing was not political. In my opinion, this timing does seem pretty political. I think it's pretty obvious. Less than 2 weeks away from an election, we've been talking about election interference, for years now at this point, since the last election, and everyone is kind of assuming that this is a political move. They can say that it's not, but I think that we all see through that. And honestly, it doesn't matter to me if this is or isn't a political move. It was going to happen eventually, and honestly, it needed to happen. To simply try and dismiss this as a political move because the election is coming up is a smokescreen by these companies and by those who want this type of censorship through gatekeeping to continue. So the lawsuit alleges that Google dominates the search engine space, controlling 80% of all US searches and 94% of mobile searches last year alone. So Google uses the $40 billion it makes in ad revenue every year to enter into lucrative agreements with others to make Google the default search engine on devices. We all know if you have a device, if you have any sort of TV or smartphone or anything like that, you've probably seen Google on it because Google has definitely dominated the market. They are the default search engine on so many devices now, as it goes on to say. The deal is so crucial to Apple, it says. Employees say losing it would be a code red. It's very interesting to hear the percents that is talked about because the money Apple makes from Google on the deal amounts to 15 to 20% of its worldwide net income, according to the complaint. In 2019, that would have amounted to $11 billion. We're not talking little pennies here. This is a massive deal, the money that Apple makes from Google, and that's why Google cares about these deals so much, because Google pays companies like Apple and LG and Motorola, Samsung to make sure that it is the default search engine on smartphones. They are giving up billions of dollars every single year to make sure that they have their place in the industry. So in an announcement on Tuesday morning, Attorney General Bill Barr said today millions of Americans rely on the internet and online platforms for their daily lives. Competition in the industry is vitally important, which is why today's challenge against Google, the gatekeeper of the internet, for violating antitrust laws is a monumental case, both for the Department of Justice and for the American people. Since my confirmation, I have prioritized the department's review of online market-leading platforms to ensure that our technology industry remains competitive. The lawsuit strikes at the heart of Google's grip over the internet for millions of American consumers, advertisers, small businesses, and entrepreneurs beholden to an unlawful monopolist. So Google, which argued 20 years ago that Microsoft was a monopoly, appears to have learned from Microsoft's mistakes, which resulted in the company settling an antitrust suit in 2001, like I had mentioned earlier. We should be careful about what we say both in public and private. Cutting off the air supply and similar phrases should be avoided, Google's chief economist warned employees, referring to a notorious line from the Microsoft case, according to the Department of Justice. The complaint also says that Google employees received strict instructions on what language to use in company emails because words matter, especially in antitrust law. In particular, Google employees were instructed to avoid using terms such as bundle, tie, crush, kill, hurt, or block competition, and to avoid observing that Google has market power in any market. So Google did make a little bit of a statement in response to all of this because it has been picking up on social media and on the internet in general. So Google search has put the world's information at the fingertips of over 1 billion people. Our engineers work to offer the best search engine results possible, constantly improving the fine-tuning of it. We think that's why a widely widely cross-section of Americans value and often love our free products. Today's lawsuit by the Department of Justice is deeply flawed. People use Google because they choose to, not because they're forced to or because they can't find alternatives. This lawsuit would do nothing to help consumers. To the contrary, it would artificially prop up lower quality search alternatives, raise phone prices, and make it harder for people to get the search services they want to use. So the department's dubious complaint. Let's talk specifics. The department's complaints rely on dubious antitrust arguments to criticize our efforts to make Google search easily available to people. Yes, like countless other businesses, we pay to promote our services, just like a cereal brand might pay a supermarket to stock its products at the end of a row or on a shelf at eye level. For digital services, when you first buy a device, it has a kind of home screen eye-level shelf. On mobile, that shelf is controlled by Apple, as well as companies like AT&T, Verizon, Samsung, and LG. On desktop computers, the shelf space is overwhelmingly controlled by Microsoft. So, we negotiate agreements with many of those companies for eye-level shelf space. But let's be clear, our competitors are readily available too if you want to use them. Here's more detail. It goes into Apple devices, Microsoft, how people access information today, and next steps, and I want to read how people access information today. There's another area in which the lawsuit is wrong about how Americans use the internet. It claims that we compete only with other general search engines, but that's demonstrably wrong. People find information in a lot of ways. They look for news on Twitter, flights on Kayak and Expedia, restaurants on OpenTable, recommendations on Instagram and Pinterest, and when searching to buy something, around 60% of Americans start on Amazon. Now, these companies, like Google, unfortunately do change what search results pop up. When you search for something very specific, sometimes even YouTube channel specific results won't pop up because they have a political agenda too. And as far as the issue of free speech, I've said it over and over, these companies want their cake and to eat it too. And what I mean by that is they can't continue to be granted immunity under Section 230 while editing content on their sites or their search results because clearly they have their own political agendas, and it shows by what content they're editing and censoring. This isn't free speech. If a company wants to be an editor, they can't have immunity. And right now they have both, and it just can't stand that way. They've used radicalization as an excuse to regulate content, pretending that radicalization is some epidemically large problem when there's nothing to back that up. Now look, no matter who your candidate is, no matter what your party is, we need to not give up, and we need to make them understand that these monopolistic gatekeepers do not equal free speech. And instead of rolling over because someone didn't get elected or because someone did get elected, we need to keep fighting against these giant corporations who will always be more interested in their bottom line and making money than ever protecting freedoms. And that's why for everyone to have free speech, these companies such as Google and Facebook must be regulated and held accountable for their actions. I support these large companies being regulated, and even though this lawsuit isn't the answer, or isn't probably the answer, I do support the general direction in which it's headed, and I really wish that it didn't end up this way, but unfortunately, it definitely has. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a like and share it, and of course, if you did not, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.